from my left to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Lauren Shizik, Executive Director.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Sarah Langmead, Commissioner.
John Bullock, City Council Representative for the Commission.
Catherine Good, Commissioner.
Myra Mendeleev, Commissioner.
Nicole Battle, Commissioner representing nonprofit developers.
Sure. Tamara Woods, Commissioner representing Department of Housing and Community Development.
Tyreek Charlouse, CHAP staff.
Rachel Donaldson, CHAP staff.
Thank you. The CHAP mission is to enhance and promote the culture and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and architectural value. The goals of CHAP include preserving historic architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past into its future. I want to share with you all a few housekeeping items. Thank you, Eddie. Couple things. If you have your cell phone, we ask that you all put it on vibrate. If you have a call that you need to make, please feel free to take the call outside because these mics pick up sound. Well, you will find that when we have our briefing sessions, we allow public testimony. The sheet that you saw that came up is a sheet that Eddie gave me. If any of you want to testify, please reach out to Eddie. Eddie will put your name on the sheet. I will then, when it's time for public testimony, announce your name. When you come up, give your full name, and this is how we do it. We give you 3 minutes. We'll give you 2 minutes and a half to speak. When you see me lift the gavel, that means you got 30 seconds left. Now, folks who are here or have seen me do it before, very rarely do I throw the gavel down and interrupt somebody speaking. But when you see it, you mean you have 30 seconds left. If there is public comment that you want to give, do not have it amongst yourselves. Please have it outside in the hallway. So thank you. I would like to make a motion to waive the reading of the minutes.
So moved.
Are there, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Due process and review procedures. CHAP reviews applications in conjunction with the Baltimore permit process of the permit section of the Department of Housing and Community Development. If a building permit application is filed prior to historic design review, the application is placed pending completion of the CHAP review process. The review process is completed by issuing an authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations and does not diminish the force or urban renewal plans, building codes, zoning codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applicants must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. Design review considers the proposed work, taking into consideration the historical and architectural character of the structure and of the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain how their project complies with the design guidelines. Minor projects. In order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Many projects must not significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged fabric. All minor work must clearly meet the design guidelines. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new constructions are considered major projects and are reviewed at a public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning department to begin the review process. An electric version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project shall be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP staff presents recommendations to the Commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the applicant may make a presentation to the commission. Interested parties include neighborhood associations, also have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with the Baltimore City Code. After an authorization to proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The commission's process is impartial, and staff's comments are evidence that assist the commission in rendering a decision. I'd like to make a motion to approve the final agenda.
Move to approve the final agenda?
Do I have a second? No, all in favor? Aye. Any abstain? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let us begin. First on our agenda, we have City Council Bill 260147, Landmark List, St. Peter's Cemetery, 2310 Lorraine Street, and 1301 Moreland Avenue. The applicant is Councilmember John Bullock, and the staff presenting is our own Rachel Donaldson. Rachel?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks. On February 9th, 2026, last night, Councilmember John Bullock introduced legislation to designate St. Peter's Cemetery as a Baltimore City landmark. This legislation is pursuant to a request from Ms. Jennifer Johnson, founder of the Friends of St. Peter's Cemetery. St. Peter's Cemetery, is located in the Bridgeview Green Lawn neighborhood in West Baltimore. It sits on a higher elevation than the surrounding neighborhood, which is common for siting for cemeteries. St. Peter's Cemetery is bounded by an unnamed alley adjacent to North Bentaloo Street to the west, the Rosemont Gardens Apartments and Midtown at Coppin Heights housing complex along Winchester Street to the south, and the Melvin H. Cade Armory, a Baltimore City landmark, and a large industrial site to the west, and an industrial tire complex along Moreland Avenue to the north. The neighborhood itself is largely comprised of two-story brick row houses developed between the 1920s and 1950s, with a couple of schools and parks. The eastern and northern boundaries of the neighborhood are defined by railroad tracks with adjacent industrial sites. And these are images of the kind of typical row houses that you can find in the neighborhood, as well as an aerial view of the cemetery in its current state. As a cemetery started by St. Peter the Apostle Church in southwest Baltimore, St. Peter's Cemetery first opened in 1851 in what was then a rural section of Baltimore County. And you have at the top left corner a portion of the Saxe map from 1869 illustrating the area in which the cemetery was developed. And this was 15 years after the cemetery first opened, so again, showing the rural nature of it. And below you have a Sanborn map, again, illustrating the lack of development for the area surrounding St. Peter's Cemetery into the 20th century. St. Peter's Cemetery illustrates key aspects of 19th century cemetery design. It displays elements of the mid-19th century rural cemetery movement through its large size and location outside the city limits. And this is one of the interesting things about St. Peter's Cemetery, is that it really illustrates the intersection between two major cemetery design movements of the 19th century, one being the rural cemetery movement, and again, this is where you see the kind of construction outside city limits and the size of it. But then it also displays elements of what became known as the lawn park style of cemetery design that became especially popular during the Gilded Age. And that's when the kind of natural elements that were common to the rural cemetery ideal fell by the wayside in favor of sculpted monuments, like typical like obelisks, other kinds of monuments that you see here. So it really illustrates, again, two aspects of cemetery design. It also illustrates aspects of 19th century ethnic burial practices, specifically the tendency among ethnic Catholic cemeteries to position individual gravestones in tight formation. And so you have here a picture of a family plot illustrating that kind of tight formation common to ethnic cemeteries. And then you have here a LiDAR map showing, again, it's kind of hard to see, but you could see the mounds of individual burials, even if they're lacking gravestones, and you can, again, see that kind of tight line formation that, again, was typical to ethnic burial practices. And here is another aerial image. This is from 1927, and again showing the general lack of vegetation. Again, really getting into that expansive lawn park ideal of cemetery design. In addition to headstones, historic iron fencing surrounding family burial plots, and monuments, the property also consists of the original gatehouse, which is a contributing factor, property, and a house built by the Jonah House in the late 1990s, which is non-contributing. The gatehouse, which likely dates to the 19th century, is a single-story, three-bay structure clad in stucco with a steep side gable roof and a front gabled wooden portico. St. Peter's Cemetery hosted Catholic burials through the 1960s and after. Several priests from St. Peter the Apostle Church were buried there, including Monsignor Edward McColgan, who founded St. Peter the Apostle Church. The cemetery also included burials of congregants from other Catholic churches, notably 3 historically Black Catholic churches, St. Peter Claver, which is a Baltimore City landmark, St. Gregory, and St. Francis Xavier. Black congregants were primarily buried in a section located in the northwest portion of the cemetery. The cemetery also included burials from St. Martin, a church that primarily served Irish and German Catholics that formed out of St. Peter the Apostle. In addition to churches, the cemetery was also the burial grounds for girls and women who died while in the care of the House of the Good Shepherd. In Baltimore, there were 2 such institutions. One was for white girls and women that opened in 1864, and another for Black girls and women run by the Magdalene Sisters that opened in 1892. According to a historical sketch of the cemetery from 1938, St. Peter's was the burial site for the Magdalene Sisters as well. The buildings of both of these institutions have since been demolished. And some of you may be familiar with the home for the Good Shepherd Home for Black girls and women because it was featured in Billie Holiday's autobiography when she spent was institutionalized there as a child at 2 points in her childhood. The most recent burial is also that of perhaps the most famous priest in Baltimore, Philip Berrigan. Berrigan was a Josephite priest who served in St. Peter Claver and was active in the civil rights movement beginning in the 1950s. He is most known, however, for his anti-war activism in the 1960s through the 1980s. In 1968, Berrigan, along with his brother Daniel and 7 others, known as the Catonsville Nine, took hundreds of draft files from the draft board in Catonsville, Maryland, and burned them in the parking lot with homemade napalm to protest the war. Berrigan served 38 months in prison for his role in these protests and subsequently spent 11 years incarcerated for his continued activism. Berrigan and Elizabeth McAllister, his wife, co-founded the Jonah House, a faith-based social justice group that is currently using the house on site. St. Peter's Cemetery had struggled with maintenance issues dating back to the 1920s. The problem worsened over time as St. Peter the Apostle did not have the means to provide for continual upkeep of the grounds. Burials appear to have stopped or at least significantly slowed by the late 1960s. In 1968, the Archdiocese sold 3.5 acres of land in the south and southwestern sections to Henry J. Knott, a private developer, who constructed an apartment complex there. The agreement included the option to buy an additional 1.5 acres. The Warwick Arms Apartments, a lower-income development consisting of 164 units, was constructed on the original parcel. And you can see from these aerial images, one from 1964 on the left, prior to the construction, and then afterwards you see the Warwick Arms Apartments, which are now the Rosemont Gardens Apartments, and Midtown at Coppin. So those buildings still exist. This was not the first time development encroached on the property. In 1925, St. Peter's Cemetery, with the pastor of St. Peter the Apostle Church acting as the chair of the board, sold a portion to a developer to construct a row of row houses along Bentaloo Street that you can still see in these images. And also in this previous image, and you could also see this in the LiDAR map as well, there is a linear mound of dirt kind of adjacent to the southern boundary by the apartment complex. And these are images taken from standing on top of that dirt mound, showing broken headstones and other monuments and family plot demarcations. So there has, again, this kind of goes to there has been a decline, but the cemetery itself still retains a remarkable degree of integrity. And you can see in these images of areas that have been cleared due to the efforts of community members in the 1980s, and again, more recently, with the efforts led by Ms. Jennifer Johnson. So despite the kind of the encroachment from industry, the remaining site does still, again, retain a remarkable degree of integrity. So the applicable landmark criteria for designation are three. One is that first is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to broad patterns of Baltimore history. And we can see that through the churches that were connected, the figures, significant figures who are buried there. That's actually going to come up in part two, criterion two. But also the design of the cemetery. St. Peter's was one of the first Catholic churches to develop a cemetery outside of the city, a good distance from the actual parish. Other Catholic cemeteries would follow suit. For criterion two that are associated with the lives of persons significant to Baltimore's past, we have Monsignor Edward McColgan, who is buried there, as well as Philip Berrigan. And then three, that embody distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, and the like. And you can see this in the cemetery design itself, which is still visible, particularly the emphasis on the lawn park style. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back. The property is not located within a CHAP district. Therefore, comments from an architectural review committee are not applicable. The following organizations have been informed of this landmark designation hearing: Baltimore Heritage, Baltimore National Heritage Area, Preservation Maryland, and Bridgeview Green Lawn Community Association. Due to community efforts, as of now, we have 24 letters of support for the nomination, including letters from Ms. Jennifer Elsie Johnson, who is an advocate for this designation and founder of Friends of St. Peter's Cemetery, and her mother, Mrs. Sandra A. Johnson, who is also an advocate of this designation. State Delegate Sandy Rosenberg, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, Johns Hopkins at Baltimore Heritage, Sammy Samuels, director of the Irish Railroad Workers Museum, Dr. Elgin Klug, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, president of the Laurel Cemetery Memorial Project, Dr. Gabriel Dean with Johns Hopkins University, Jesse Bennett Jr., research coordinator at Mount Auburn Cemetery, another Baltimore City landmark, Colleen Rafferty, executive director of the Rose Hill Cemetery in Hagerstown, Zane Cypress, president of the Omega Baltimore Foundation, Dr. Harry Close, senior pastor of the New Union Baptist Church, Kate Berrigan, daughter of Philip Berrigan, and Patricia Quayle, whose husband Vincent Quayle led restoration efforts in the 1980s. We also have one letter in opposition from the Archdiocese of Baltimore. So as a kind of review, established on the outskirts of Baltimore City, St. Peter's Cemetery became a burial site for Catholics across Baltimore for over a century. Although it served various congregations, the cemetery was most closely associated with St. Peter the Apostle, which is the white church historically, and the church that established the cemetery, and St. Peter Claver, which is the black church, historically black church, both of which have since been closed or merged with other parishes. One of the primary social and religious institutions connected to St. Peter's Cemetery Of those, only 2 are currently Baltimore City landmarks. 2 others have been demolished, and those are the Houses of the Good Shepherd. Over the course of its history, St. Peter's Cemetery intersected with important local and national issues, events, and figures. It illustrates key aspects of 19th century cemetery design, the politics of racial segregation in ecclesiastical and social institutions, and social justice activism within the Catholic Church. And so because of this, staff recommends a finding of approval for the designation of this property as a Baltimore City landmark because it meets criteria 1, 2, and 3 of CHAP's criteria for designation.
Rachel, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Rachel? Yes, ma'am.
How many other cemeteries in Baltimore City are landmarked? And if the number doesn't have to be exact.
That is, do we know the exact number?
I looked it up because I was curious before. There, in the search online, there are 4. And then for reference, there are
4 that are designated individually.
4 that are designated.
None of which are Catholic.
A couple of them are with a church, is my recollection. And then
Does 4 sound right? Can you answer
there
that?
are
Lauren, does 4
40.
sound right?
There are 44 churches listed as well.
Yeah, so we have 4 cemeteries that are designated in Baltimore City that are not attached to a church. That's Edding Cemetery, a small Jewish cemetery located on North and Pennsylvania Avenue, Old St. Paul's Cemetery, Friends Burial Ground, and Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is, I think, the greatest comparable to this one. We have a few others that are included in designations for House of Worship. That's Otterbein Evangelical United Brethren Church, Westminster Presbyterian Church, which, fun fact, the cemetery was first and the church was built over the cemetery. That's why there are catacombs underneath. The cemetery was first. Taylor's Chapel and Burial Ground in Northeast Baltimore, Zion Lutheran Church and Parish House, and St. John's in the Village. So yeah, currently we only have 4 cemeteries that are standalone cemeteries separated from the house of worship that they serve.
And Greenmount Cemetery is not included as a...
It is not because we only have certain items. We only have the gates and the chapel there. It's not the entirety of the cemetery.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, sorry.
Cool. Sarah, Lauren, thank you. Any other questions for Rachel? Okay, seeing none. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our petitioner, we have our own Councilman John Bullock. Yes, sir. For the record, would you give your full name, sir?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Bullock, Council Member, 9th District, and member of the Commission. This is the first time I've approached you guys in this way for some years. But again, I thank you again for the opportunity. Today is really the confluence of so many things from not only a personal but from a professional point of view. Both of my parents, who are no longer here in physical form, raised me in the Catholic faith. And my mother was also part of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Knights of St. Peter Claver. And so you think about how that fits in here. I also live within walking distance of this cemetery. And I would say this has also been one of the first times I've been lobbied at church around some of these bills. I look at one of my fellow parishioners at New All Saints. She didn't lobby me, but some members of our church did. But what I will say is, though, it speaks to the significance that this has for so many members of the faith community, particularly those who are African American. Although, as you can see from the historical analysis, that there are folks of multiple ethnic backgrounds who are buried within this cemetery. But it also comes at a very interesting point in terms of the Catholic Church in Baltimore. As many of you are aware, there have been a number of closures and mergers. And in that context, I think there was, I believe that there was a lot of fear in terms of what would happen with this location. I do also want to thank Jennifer Johnson and her family, her mother, for bringing this to my attention years ago. And they've been fighting the good fight in terms of bringing resources to the cemetery, doing their own archaeology and enlisting other academics as part of this project, but also helping to beautify this space. I'm sure you'll hear from her and others as we move forward that it really has been a labor of love. But at the end of the day, yes, the elected official who lives in the neighborhood, who also has heard from neighborhood presidents, you can see the list of letters that we've received, but also just for the history and those who've been buried there. I learned a whole lot through this process. So again, Rachel did a fantastic job. And again, I just appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to hearing from more of the folks who are here in this room. And I do look forward to a favorable disposition from the members of the commission. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Councilman, thank you, sir. Next, we will, before we have our public dialogue, we have the owners, St. Peter Cemetery, St. Peter Cemetery Restoration. Are they here? Come right on up. And give us your full name for the records.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, hit the mic button. Sorry about that. Yep, there you go.
Thank you so much. My name is Colin Wojciechowski, Collin Wojciechowski. Kindergarten was such a blast. And I'm an attorney for the Archdiocese of Baltimore. With me today, I have Mr. Nathan Nardi, who's the Director of Cemetery Operations for the Archdiocese. And together we are here representing the property owner, St. Peter's Cemetery. I'd say at the outset that the cemetery is grateful to CHAP and Councilman Bullock for their concern and attention to the sacred burial ground of Baltimore City residents, in particular those interned at this cemetery. However, at this time, the cemetery is reluctant to support an elevation to landmark status. It is the policy and committed view of the Archdiocese that no governmental or other outside authority should be granted the right to override the Church's decisions as to the proper use or prioritization of religious property. This is not a position that is taken out of adversity to government oversight, but instead out of deference to religious practice. Under church canon law, only the Archbishop of Baltimore can approve or disapprove modifications to a cemetery, but a landmark designation would of course override such authority, depriving the church of its constitutionally protected right of practicing religion free of government direction. These are beliefs that the church holds very sincerely. The cemetery is not just a property, but a sacred, consecrated place for the church's faithful, holding the remains of those destined for eternal life. The consecration of the ground transforms the land into a shrine memorializing those buried there. And the cemetery takes, as does the Archdiocese, the obligations that come with this consecration very seriously. Beyond these philosophical objections the cemetery has to the designation are the practical ones. The cemetery is concerned that both legally and logistically, there will be incredible challenges to CHAP overseeing, as we understand from the report, alterations to or repositioning of existing grave markers, given that under Maryland state law, such markers belong to and are maintained and overseen by the families of decedents, not the cemetery. Let me give you some factual scenarios that concern us. If, for example, a grave marker or monument sculpture fell over or became dislodged, a family member would not be permitted to restore it to its proper position without first seeking CHAP approval to do so. Similarly, if a family member desired to restore, repair, or replace a grave marker, they would not be permitted to do so until CHAP reviewed and approved the restoration, repair, or replacement. These markers are obviously incredibly personal to families, and requiring those families to go through this review process is, in the opinion of the cemetery, impractical. It is with this in mind that the cemetery respectfully requests that if CHAP is intent on moving the landmark designation forward, that it work with the cemetery to revise the scope of CHAP oversight to something more in keeping with the cemetery's practice and Maryland state law. I thank you very much for your time today, and I'm happy to field any questions you might have.
Mr. Collin, thank you, sir. Before you sit down, are there any questions for Mr. Collin? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Gary Rodwell.
Oh, your mic, Gary.
So you suggest working together in some ways. Do you have any kind of examples of how you would envision that taking place?
Sure. I mean, I can say that our philosophical objection overall to the government oversight aside, we would be very happy to, I think, work with CHAP on CHAP oversight for the gatehouse as was proposed as a contributing factor there, or any new construction that might come out. It is the landscaping oversight aspect of the CHAP process that gives the cemetery the most pause and concern.
Say more.
Well, as noted, sir, they're not our headstones. You know, they don't belong to us. We don't really have authority under state law to do anything with them. They belong to the families of the decedents who are resting eternally at the cemetery. And so we would never actually practically, as the cemetery, come before CHAP and ask for permission to alter a headstone because we don't have the legal authority to do so. It's only the family members of that decedent that do. And so practically speaking, I'm just not really sure how that oversight is going to work.
Thank you, Gary. Yes. Hey, Catherine.
So I understand where you're coming from in that perspective, but practically speaking, we have several large historic cemeteries in Baltimore that are in similar positions where maybe the headstones at this point are so old that there's not really a specific family that can come and maintain them. And those cemeteries maintain a endowment to be able to do things like reset headstones. And so I just take issue with that comment, knowing that there are other historic cemeteries that have found a way to be able to do that and provide some more maintenance and upkeep of their historic cemeteries in that way. And I think that in part might be why everything is before us here today.
Sure, I would just say, as was noted, none of those cemeteries are Catholic, so I can't speak to how another religion's practice kind of oversees their cemetery oversight. I can just tell you how things are done by the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and that is our policy to follow that state law provision. We do have an endowment that provides for maintenance and oversight of the cemetery, and we are slowly working our way through the backlog. This is a different cemetery than almost anything else in the city in the sense that you have this rural component to it. And so we have to find this balance of when we clear certain parts of the land, we have to make sure that we have the money to then maintain that land once it's cleared. So we are slowly but surely making our way through. And as you saw, there are some broken headstones once you get into that more wooded area. We're making our way there. It just takes time.
Tamara, go ahead.
I have a question for you, but first I did want to ask, maybe at a later time, if Executive Director Shizik, you could speak a little bit separately, maybe after I ask this next question, but about the interface between CHAP oversight and cemetery specifically, and what that means, because there is a level of detail, and I definitely acknowledge your concerns, because it is such a personal thing to people and to families. So that was one request. But my question actually for you is around your connection with the community itself. And I was listening to Councilman Bullock and to Ms. Donaldson kind of talk about the community and the work that they've done over the decades to really help clean and keep things together. So have you all been working specifically as the Archdiocese with the community to make sure that maintenance has been done? Or is this something that the community has been doing because there has not been the maintenance, which is bringing it to Councilman Bullock to say, we would like this to be a landmark because there has not been enough attention paid. So I'm curious if you could respond to that a little bit.
No, of course, I appreciate that question. As I said, there is a small endowment that that the cemetery itself has for maintenance here, and then the Archdiocese will supplement that endowment as well with additional resources as they are available for the cemetery. And we've been grateful that members of the community have, stepped up when we can't do everything there, because it's a big Archdiocese and we certainly can't do everything there. There's always more work that we can do with the community that we're always happy to do, but, we think it's a little bit of both.
Mr. Collins, do me a favor, though. Answer our chairwoman's question, though. Have the Archdiocese worked with the community to fix or maintenance the burial, or have they been doing it because you haven't? That's what I need to know now.
No, I would say, and I'd invite Mr. Nardi to come up. I think he can speak better to some of the community efforts that have been done here. Yes, I would submit that we have been working with the community
Okay.
in addition to doing our own work
Okay.
there as well.
Okay. Understood. Go ahead, Mara.
So I have a question just because I know that there is a history, particularly with cemeteries that have been for Black people, Black communities, that have been redeveloped and, something has been built over them. That has been prominent throughout history and in the region. And so my question is, the Archdiocese owns this property. Whether or not there's an intent, hypothetically, you could sell this property off to a developer.
I suppose that theoretically we could sell any property off to a developer. It's an incredibly cumbersome process, specifically with a cemetery, because we want to respect those who have been interred there. As the councilman noted, the Archdiocese has been going through the process known as Seek the City, wherein we are reducing our footprint within the city of Baltimore. Those plans have been finalized and sent to Rome for approval, and notably, this cemetery is not in anything, that we're looking to not maintain anymore. We intend on keeping it.
Okay, yeah, I understand, especially you mentioned there's current families, I suppose, that have headstones, so it's a current cemetery, but I'm just thinking down the road, if it's not as current, I think this designation could protect it from ever being turned into anything else. So I just wanted to clarify the power that the Archdiocese could potentially have down the road, so thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question that's probably more of a administrative, CHAP staff question, but it's in response to the owner's comments and the scenario suggested about maintaining headstones. Now, just because we usually talk about buildings here, so we know that CHAP oversight comes into play when a building permit is filed for. And a building permit would not be required for repair, of a headstone, I'm assuming. I would think that it would, I can imagine that subdivision would then require a permit that would then trigger CHAP review, right? That new construction on a site would trigger a building permit, which would trigger CHAP review. But what activity, but landscaping doesn't require a permit. Unless it's really regrading. So what would trigger actual CHAP review for this cemetery?
So that is outlined in the designation report in terms of what is considered, what will be considered under CHAP review and what will not. And yes, typically CHAP review is triggered by a Baltimore City building permit. However, CHAP does review and approve scopes of work that don't rise to the level of requiring a building permit. Things like replacing roofs in Baltimore City does not require a permit, requires CHAP review. For some of our other Baltimore City landmarks, particularly those with archaeological significance or landscape significance, the entirety of Patterson Park, for example, the entirety of Hanlon Park, alterations to those landscapes require CHAP review and approval. And so that's really a thing where it requires communication and collaboration between the owner and CHAP staff. And in my experience with other cemeteries, and of course I also come to this as a background as an archaeologist where we deal with a lot of graves. We don't aim to find graves, but we find them in places where they're not expected, often. And typically with graves and working with cemeteries, I'm thinking of, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, thinking of St. Paul's Cemetery. They regularly will have a cemetery conservator go and work on the site. And he doesn't tell me exactly what he's going to do, because it depends on what, it's going to, depend on responding to, conditions there. But he tells me, generally, here's what I do when I, here's my general, scope. Here's my order of ops. Here's what I do when I, restore a monument. Here's what I do when I do repointing. Here's what I do in order to safely remove vegetation so it doesn't potentially pull up human remains above grade, because trees do that. And so it isn't so much of a, really CHAP needing to review the blow by blow. It's really just coming up with developing a cemetery maintenance plan and, key strategies for how would this be cared for? How would these things be done? And I think that, I think what's interesting is, and while I understand that this is a unique circumstance in that, the Catholic Church owns it, I think in terms of, the issues of, frankly, abandoned plots is a really common one. I understand that, the individuals who built who put up those headstones own them, but so many people may not necessarily, their descendants may not know that it's there. They may not know how to care for it. And there are, there are opportunities for resources and for grants and for matching funds that can be made available for doing some of that work. And that money is available when there is a historic designation. And right now there is no historic designation, and so there's no opportunity to access those funds, those grants, those resources, and even technical assistance. There's technical assistance that's available for free or with grant funding for this kind of thing. And so, we really see that. And also, too, sorry, just to take a step back as well, regarding the CHAP review of things like grading, et cetera. I understand that that's not the intent, but sometimes those things might happen. But there are also existing cemetery laws that require that if there is any, excavation or work in a cemetery, that there needs to be a plan for, for accidental discovery of finding human remains. And so really anytime there's going to be any subsurface disturbance in a cemetery, regardless of how deep it is, particularly when there's a cemetery that has a tremendous amount of trees and vegetation, they grow into the ground and create bioturbation. It brings bones up. It brings cemetery grave goods up. That's just the nature of it. And so really in a cemetery, any cemetery, you have to be ready to find human remains at any level of ground. I have found them on the surface next to trees. So I think that there's that reality, and the goal of, and the intention of this, of the review, of the CHAP review, and sort of outlining, what CHAP would review and would not review isn't in any way intended to, bind or limit, the Archdiocese or other stewards in any way. I think the idea is that we want to be partners and help provide resources and knowledge and expertise and assistance in stewardship. And that's really why we went sort of deep into the itemization of what are the things that we would want to review and want to have oversight over.
Thank you for that response, and I apologize for not being more familiar with the designation prior, but I do see that the pages 9 and 10 of the designation outline what CHAP would be reviewing. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you both. Any other questions for Mr. Collin? Okay. Oh, yes, Tamara, yeah.
One last question. In your testimony, you feel that the landmarking is a violation of RLUIPA?
The interpretation of RLUIPA that I would have is that, not to make a legal analysis on the spot, but that the designation itself maybe or maybe not is, but that the action of the oversight is where RLUIPA comes into play. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Collin, thank you, sir. Appreciate you. So now we are at the portion of our public testimony sign-in. We have one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who wish to testify. I just want you all to be very mindful that you have 3 minutes. Once you get to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm gonna lift up. If you go past 30 seconds, I hit the gavel. The first person that I want to bring up is Ms. Jennifer Johnson.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I'm already going to be a little bit out of order. I wear 3 hats here. I wear Jennifer Johnson's hat. I wear the hat of founder of Friends of St. Peter's, and I also wear the hat of Saved It Incorporated. So I would ask that you just give me a little bit of extra time to give my presentation today, because I am speaking in 3 different capacities.
Being mindful and respectful of everyone else's time, I've got to give you 3 minutes.
Well, I tried. So when we allow freedom to ring, When we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all God's children, Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. What does freedom look like for a cemetery that is celebrating its 175th anniversary this year? To me, it looks like St. Peter's Cemetery becoming a historic landmark designation, which should have happened a very long time ago. After all, the two main feeder churches that buried at St. Peter's Cemetery, St. Peter's the Apostle and St. Peter Claver, became a historic landmark designation, one on the National Registry in 1976, and then CHAP designation in 2009 and 1982. Historic landmark designation protects cultural significant sites, often increasing property values and enhancing community character. Key benefits include access to financial incentives like tax credits and grants, stricter protection against demolition or inappropriate development, and enhanced prestige. But sometimes to understand where we are going, we have to examine how we got here. To understand how this cemetery may have gotten to the state it is in, one needs to look at the founding history of the Catholic Church with the Jesuits and usurpations and their ownership of slaves. Slavery was abolished in 1864. This cemetery opened in 1851. So many of the early African Americans that were buried here were just leaving slavery, many likely from Catholic-owned plantations in Southern Maryland. The color divide continued, with Blacks often only being allowed to sit in the rear or the balcony of white churches like St. Peter the Apostle. I met a lady just last year at an event at St. Peter Claver, and her family was one of those families that set up in that balcony. I won't belabor the point, but segregation and racism has existed in the Catholic Church since its inception. I thank the Church for its formation in 2025 for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' permanent formation of a subcommittee for the promotion of racial justice and reconciliation. Now back to the cemetery. For me, freedom looks like historic landmark designation of the cemetery. It looks like repair of graves and clearance of overgrowth, which will help many. With the help of many, I've had the pleasure of clearing 4 sections of the cemetery. It looks much more like a beautiful manicured outdoor space, sacred space, and is also an outdoor classroom where one day we can safely see little Irish, African American, German, Lithuanian, Hungarian, Italian, French, Japanese, Hispanic, and many other immigrant children skipping along paths accompanied by their parents and learning their family history. I would just like to take a few minutes to thank everybody in the room today. I can't thank you personally and call your names because it's going to take too long, but I am grateful that you are here. Pope Leo XIV, the first African-born pope in the history of the Catholic Church, while born in America, even has his ancestry as French, Italian, Spanish, and Louisiana Creole, and descendants from Haiti, stated the following: the Catholic Church is here to accompany immigrants and their families in need. You have in your hands a very great task to accompany those who need to sign a sign that God never abandons anyone, not the smallest, not the poorest, not the foreigner, not anyone. To me, a very bold sign that aligns with Pope Leo XIV's message to the leaders of the church is making St. Peter a historic landmark designation. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you in advance to CHAP and the Baltimore City Council for correcting historical wrongs and making St. Peter's a historic landmark designation.
Ms. Jennifer, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Next on our list, we have Dan Feven. If I pronounce your name wrong, forgive me, but give your full name when you come on this. Yes, sir. Okay. Next on our list, we have Irene Henderson. And as you approach the bench, when you get up, give us your full name for the record.
My name is Irene Sims Henderson, and my mother was a Methodist reverend. I grew up in the church and can clearly see and say that the current conditions at St. Peter's Cemetery are not how a cemetery should be kept. Making this cemetery a historic landmark designation is God's way of showing mercy to everyone with loved ones buried at the cemetery, my ancestors included. Proverbs 28:13. Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. May God have mercy on your souls.
Thank you so much. Next on our list, we have Ms. Sandra Johnson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer's mother. There'd be no doubt about it. Can I give her my time? No. Basically, there are just a couple of things I want to mention. I am currently working 2 days a week at archives, city archives, and I'm collecting information on all who have been buried at St. Peter Clavers for the eventuality, I hope, of being able to honor them in some plaque or something in some form or fashion. We have several relatives that are at that cemetery. One being my mother. She was buried there in 1960. And before that, her mother. And before that, her father's mother. So we go back several generations, and I also have uncles and cousins and whatnot there. So we have a vested interest. And Jennifer took it upon herself to start doing something about that interest. And I'm very thankful to her for that. One of the things that I noticed was that around 1960, when my mother was buried there, I got a letter from the church, I guess it was around 64 or so, telling me that they were basically selling part of the church. That scared the heck out of me. I was only, I was less than a teenager or a little bit more than a teenager. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? We don't have money. We don't have this. We don't have that. There was nothing I could do except I did send a letter saying, please tell me what you're doing, when you're doing it, so that we'll have some heads up and maybe we can move her. The thought was, and what they came back and told me is they were going to bury these people at, the Woodlawn Cemetery. And I thought, okay, that's close to where I live, maybe at least I'll have that gratitude. Well, the point is, the next letter I got from them said they're not going to sell it after all. And what I later found out in history was that there was somebody who, a gentleman who I believe was an attorney for the Irish, who had stopped them right in the middle of what they were doing. Otherwise, they would have sold off another piece. So they have a history of selling at least, I think it was 2 attempts now, to sell property, and that's something that would affect many of us. So I really would not like to see that happen. I thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your time. Next on our list, we have a Janice Green.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Janice Green. I'm a former commissioner on the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture. And in that respect, we supported Ms. Jones in her efforts to declare St. Peter Cemetery an historical landmark. I have one question for the gentleman from the Catholic Church. If the Catholic Church viewed this cemetery and these cemeteries as sacred ground, why did it come to such disrepair in the first place? They lay and rest beneath Mother Earth, black bodies of unmeasurable worth, in roots of trees in whispered moans, then awaken our sacred ancestral bones. Not just remains in graves confined, but sacred vessels strong and divine. Their ribs, our rhythm, their skulls, our thrones, their spines, our bridges, these sacred ancestral bones. We call them now, let none forget. Their legacy is hope and not regret, but strength that through the ages shone, we remember our sacred ancestral bones. I was a part of the Seek the City to Find campaign, and I know what they did, what the Catholic Church did, and what they always do. They used the plantation tactic of pitting black parishes against one another. So we would be so busy fighting to see which parish would be stayed open and which parishes would have to close, we would be unaware of the Catholic Church's attempts to sell our churches, to take over the land, to diminish the amount of black Catholics in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. because they come from a legacy of the Roman Catholic Church, thinking that people of color have no intellect to teach and no souls to save. As a proud alumnus of St. Francis Academy, founded by Mother Mary Lang in 1829, 97 years old, I remember the time when bishops who owned slaves did everything they could to close the doors of the Oblate Sisters of Providence. And had they succeeded, they would not be here today, and they would not have been here to teach so many young Black girls and now young Black men, not only about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but about their faith and about their love. So I just want to say now that I advocate for historic landmark designation of St. Peter's Cemetery in order so that the young Black girls who were buried there, who were abused when they went into the House of Good Shepherd, would not be ignored in death. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have, cannot pronounce the last name, but Dave. Is there Dave here?
Dave Hunter?
Yes. There you go. Would you like to come up? Thanks.
I have horrible handwriting.
It's okay. For the record, give us your full name.
My name is David Harrison Hunter. I was born in Baltimore. I no longer live in the city, but I grew up 17 years here. Went to school here and been a Catholic for all my life. And one of my concerns is there are people buried at St. Peter's that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. I have my father's, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and there's at least 5 of them that I can directly trace to. And I do appreciate the efforts of Jennifer and the group to try to clean up the community. I wasn't aware that the Catholic Church would allow me to establish some markers for these ancestors of mine, which are currently unmarked. I haven't been to the cemetery, but I did pay for New Cathedral to have some markers made for my grandparents and great-grandparents because my family couldn't afford at the time. So I do appreciate the efforts to try to improve the cemetery because for me, it's a very cherished place in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Appreciate you. Last on our list, Johns Hopkins.
Hi, good afternoon. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage. For most of my adult life, I didn't think about cemeteries. I didn't hate them. It just wasn't something on my radar screen. But about 10 years ago, that changed for me, and I think many Americans, when we started having public discussions over who we put on pedestals in our public places, which histories we talk about at our national parks and here locally in Baltimore, and about cemeteries. And of course, I'm thinking about Laurel Cemetery, the black cemetery that got paved over for a surface parking lot of a strip mall off of Bel Air Road, and the cemetery in Clifton Park that was virtually demolished for golf cart paths or whatever reasons. Those folks back 150 years ago chose to honor their dead, from national figures like Harvey Johnson to folks that history has forgotten. And I think that we have started to have the discussion of how we need to honor that as well. So here we have St. Peter's. We have a fantastic history from Rachel. We believe at Baltimore Heritage that it absolutely meets the criteria for CHAP landmark status. But maybe in an even bigger way, it meets a civic obligation that we have to be courageous and to be thoughtful about what we choose to honor historically, which voices we choose to amplify, and which values we choose to lift up. Thank you.
Thank you, Johns. We're already at our recommendation page. However, before we go into deliberation, we do have some folks online. Tyreek, if there's anyone online, let me know, and we'll give them an opportunity to give public testimony. Mind you, while that's taking place, you have 3 minutes, and I won't have the gavel because you might not be able to see me, but I'll point to Tyreek, and Tyreek, you can point to them.
We have 7 individuals on WebEx.
Okay, did you? Here's what we're gonna do. We have someone, oh, sorry, there was someone here who had a phone number, but we're not going to unmute them. What we're going to do is we're going to unmute people one by one and ask if you would like to testify, and then you'll need to give your full name and your testimony, taking 3 minutes. Okay, Allison just advised that she's observing, no comments. Okay. C. Phoebus, we sent you an unmute request. If you would like to unmute to testify.
Thank you. No testimony.
Mr. London, I'm going to assume that you are not testifying. You're just observing?
Yeah, just observing Dwayne London in the councilman's office.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Ms. Eileen McGuckian just sent you a request to unmute if you'd like to provide testimony.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Eileen McGuckian, and I'm with a group called the Coalition to Protect Maryland Burial Sites. And it has been our experience that recognition by way of historic designation is a way to not only honor the properties, but also to give them an opportunity to participate and be eligible for the types of incentive, not tax incentives because they're not usually taxed, but opportunities to get grants, opportunities to have the public come out and help that they wouldn't get if they were not recognized. So we have seen time after time that recognition as an historic site or a landmark is very helpful, and hope that will happen in this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are calling on Mr. Rob Young now to unmute. Mr. Young. All right. Moving on, we are going to request that Sheila Wiggins now unmute and give testimony.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Wiggins, and I live in that block of Bentelow Street that is immediately to the east of the cemetery. I have lived in this neighborhood for close to 70 years. And so I have what the things that go on in the cemetery have an immediate impact on the neighborhood. So if any efforts to maintain the cemetery would also help the immediate neighbors here. I remember when the southern part of the cemetery was sold and the apartments were built on there, and of course that changed the demographics and the characteristics of the neighborhood. This neighborhood at that time was predominantly homeowners, and it still has a majority in the 12 and the 1300 block. The majority of people living here are still homeowners. They actually own their property. But I would like to see some protection for the cemetery, once again, to guard against any possibility of the cemetery being sold to developers. And I would also like to know that, that there's some oversight to keeping the grass cut, to maintaining the trees, all of those types of things, to keep it the way I remember it being when I was a child. And also, I've already written a letter kind of explaining my views on giving historic landmark designation to the cemetery. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
Mr. Young, circling back to you. Going once, going twice. All right, that is all for.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you, sir. Commissioners, before we make a recommendation and render a decision, I want to give you all an opportunity to deliberate amongst each other, and then we will collectively come to the conclusion. Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
One thing I just wanted to bring up, given the Archdiocese concern about even being able to, set grave markers upright, I don't think that's the level of oversight and intention. We don't want to prevent families from being able to do maintenance. And so I just wanted to clarify with Director Suzik's, words are hard, what the intention is behind that line, I guess, or direction in the nomination.
I'm also happy to tag team with Rachel. I think the line that you're referring to is under landscape, features under landscape review. This is on bottom page 9.
Correct.
CHAP will review alterations to landscape, including alterations to repositioning of existing features and installation of new features, including grave markers, monuments, sculptures, pathways, fencing, lighting, grading of soil that results in a change of topography of more than 12 inches, excavation larger than 5 feet and deeper than 12 inches due to archaeological potential, removal of healthy mature trees, removal of second growth trees on grave sites. And are you referring just to the what you had said, the repositioning of existing features? Was that the?
Correct. I'm just thinking about, where headstones have fallen over and they need to be set upright.
Yeah.
The intention isn't that something like that has to be submitted for oversight.
Yeah.
It's when you actually need to move a marker to, a different location or put a footing or something like that.
Or do excavation. Yeah, for that. Yeah.
Right, along those lines, I was thinking that perhaps if the landmark designation goes through, it would make sense to have a memorandum of understanding between the owner and CHAP that's in more detail potentially than this list. I mean, this list is has a lot of good detail, but to clarify maintenance scenarios and outline what is and is not subject to oversight.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable. So then what I'm hearing is perhaps a suggestion from Commissioner Good to strike the words repositioning of for existing features.
I think that is confusing.
Okay.
Because it can be taken in a lot of different ways, and if the intention is about, hey, we're moving this headstone from this place and we're moving it somewhere else, it's not to prevent, repair and getting that set back upright. That's a little confusing.
Right.
The word relocating may be more accurate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just a couple of thoughts. The project that comes to mind, and I know it's not the same as the African Burial Ground project in New York, and so many things have been said here, and I think we're all, thinking it, or many of us are thinking, and I think, Mara, you said it, is really about the preservation of African American sacred spaces and other cultural sacred spaces, which in this country traditionally have not been done. And so we have a decision to make, and it's an important decision. And it's been like you said, how many, burial grounds do we have? The African Burial Ground Project brought to like the national forefront this very conversation. And I'm sitting here listening to everything, and we have a decision right here and right now, which will have an impact for generations to come. It will have an impact, but we're in this moment. And I think it's important to make a decision that honors, to your point, what has not been done in the past. The other thing, and I don't know others on the commission, but I'm going to look over at the executive director because she knows I have worked on a project where we have had to do archaeology because there was the threat of grave sites either being found or having to be moved for a building that stands today. And from a development standpoint, yes, there may be changes to the land. Yes, land may be sold or moved or all of these things that may happen. But even if that happens, there are repercussions and entitlements, and there are discussions and entitlements that have to be adhered to, or at least conversations about. And I know you know that well because you walk through that process. And so and I believe that particular site is a landmark, one of the oldest in the city, and it's protected. So, and that was a real conversation. So from my standpoint, I know we aren't voting yet, but I'm going to vote in favor because of so many things that have happened. But also I know in this particular case that I'm thinking of, this building, is that because it was protected, we had certain conversations and we had certain things in the way that project moved. And I do think when we're talking about preservation of sacred spaces in the city of Baltimore, moving towards equity and inclusion of our spaces, then we have to honor that in our actions. And so for that reason, I will be voting, in favor.
Tamara, thank you. You brought something to light just for me because I once had a conversation with my pop about boxing because we both like boxing. Mm-hmm. And if you all remember, one of our commissioners here was Mr. Larry Gibson. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to him about Jack Johnson and everything. And he says, no, Spikes. Jack Johnson was good, but he wasn't the first. I said, what are you talking about? So then he says, he gives me an address. And when he got the address, he told me to call him. I went to this place called Auburn Cemetery. The minute I get to the gate, I see this big, huge, white grave site, and it says Joe Gaines. So Harry Spice goes on his cell phone, and I literally look up this guy, and he really was the first African-American boxer. But what got me, Tamara, it was Mike Tyson who visited before me, and he saw the gravesite, and he put money towards building a new gravesite for him because he respected the sport so much. I share that with you all because, to your point, Tamara, history can build history. Here you have the first black boxer and then arguably one of the greatest boxers on the earth to come and say, this is so important, I need to make sure the world remembers. Mm-hmm. So as chairman, I can't say what my decision will be. I think people know where I'm going with this. So this is very, very shockingly important. And just looking historically, and I got to say, Catherine, thank you for asking the question, how many historical gravesites do we have? Right? Because we have to figure out a way to honor history because in a couple of years, all of us aren't going to be here. So the question is, what in the world did we do? So for that, I yield. But I'll give anyone else an opportunity before we look at the recommendation and move forward. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to just make a note that the landmark status doesn't, unfortunately, I think in many cases, doesn't require or make owners do maintenance on a property. And I'm sure we all wish that we could enforce something like that, but that's not under our powers. And so the best we can do is to offer protections on what is there and to prevent future development or modifications that would compromise that place. And so I think in this case, while I understand the hesitancy from the diocese, we have so many examples not just with cemeteries, but also with churches and other religious institutions that are on the landmarks list, that to me, that isn't a detriment or preventative to having a religious cemetery placed on the landmarks list.
Okay. If there's no other comment or question, our recommendation is as such. Before we do the recommendation, I know, Lauren, we had this piece here. Do we want to read that and put that in place too?
Well, I think we need to ask for a motion.
Yeah, we have to ask for a motion for this. So,
I can make a motion, Commissioner.
by all means.
I propose that we approve the staff recommendation with modification to the language of, I want to make sure I got this right, so if your note says it, striking, repositioning, and changing it to relocation. Did I get that right?
Was
And
that the
then
consensus? Right. Okay.
And the addition of a follow-up memorandum of, did you say understanding? As opposed to agreement, understanding, to clarify the details of the oversight by CHAP with the cemetery.
Well
Say
said.
that right?
Well said. Do I have a second?
Second.
Brief
Oh.
question before we vote.
Okay. All right.
We've
got two brief questions, one and two.
discussion,
We have three
the
brief questions.
list that Commissioner Goda is referring to in the nomination is not part of the recommendation. So I just want to make sure that if we're voting, that the motion, are we incorporating this into the motion?
We are incorporating this into the
Yes.
motion.
Thank you.
And this would be under landscape. Am I correct, Lauren? Okay.
I think it would be both the sections entitled Built Environment and Landscape.
Yes, ma'am.
They're both relevant to the scope of oversight.
Nicole?
Oh, I was just hoping that we would also, with the MOU, also bring in the group of volunteers that have been maintaining the site, the cemetery,
That's right.
to have them weigh in on it.
Yes, ma'am. Tomorrow.
Yeah, just with the MOU, I would probably change the recommendation to explore creating an MOU and then get advice from the law department.
Okay.
I agree with that and modify my motion.
Lauren wrote it down, so we'll read it again. So we'll be fine. Okay. So the recommendation, and Lauren, when I read the recommendation, please feel free to read your piece. The recommendation, staff recommends a finding of a approval for the designation of this property as a Baltimore City landmark because it meets criteria 1, 2, 3 of CHAP's criteria for designation. In addition to the recommendation, we have
Modification to the landmark designation report language, changing the word repositioning to relocating, and explore a memorandum of understanding that clarifies expectations regarding CHAP review of the built environment and landscape that also includes, and the MOU should also include community groups.
Input.
Input, yeah. Okay. Is that?
the motion's on the floor. Do I have someone to move the motion?
I already moved it.
Yes, you did.
And I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Next on our agenda, we have nothing next on our agenda. But we have one thing on our agenda. Lauren and I received an email the other day from a very great person who has told us that they are going to be resigning from the board. That person is Jill Dennis. Jill, I can honestly say I am sad because there's a lot of conversation you've had with me, and there's a lot of conversation you've contributed to this board and this commission that has been so beneficial. And we appreciate your time. So just know that your resignation was hard to read, but we appreciate you. I want to take a second to give anyone on this team the opportunity to give kind words before we close out. and then for you to give final words. So go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, first I have a question, which is similar to a couple other folks on our board. Ms. Jill, will you be serving until a replacement is approved for you, or are you stepping back immediately?
Catherine, we'll take care of that another time.
Immediately, okay. All right. Well, I just want to say, Jill, you're the first person I sat next to at my first CHAP meeting, and I was super nervous. And you were just so warm and welcoming, and we immediately got into conversations. And just having your insight and knowledge, especially from the real estate world, has been wonderful to me to learn from you. So I really appreciate that.
Miss Jill, I am going to miss you. It's your smile, it's your quiet leadership and strength, and we're really going to miss you being on the commission.
I will be listening.
Okay. You just won't be voting.
Are you going to be like our big brother oversight?
Right. Well, I would like to echo that, Miss Jill. You have been one of the trailblazers that I have been blessed to be able to follow onto this commission. And we will miss you, but we will carry on your spirit.
All of you, and look forward to listening to the proceedings, especially the conservation district. Yeah. And any way that I can help, please feel free to give me a call.
Awesome.
I'm being called upon to speak. No, I was just listening, but I do want to say thank you. I know I'm one of the newest CHAP commissioners, and I came to CHAP on the other side, just more listening. But when I think about you, I'm gonna use a term I've heard described for others is quiet power, and that's you. Right, you're listening and you're guiding, and I just want to thank you, especially as a new CHAP commissioner. So thank you.
Awesome. Jill, thank you. Appreciate you so much. You remind me of something my little brother and I used to watch when we were kids. We were watching a He-Man one day, and the movie, and yeah, that's our generation, man. But he says something I'll never forget, and it kind of stuck with me. He says, "Don't say goodbye, say good journey." And that stuck with me and my brother for years. So good journey to you. And don't be surprised we call you when we need you, okay?
You put it out there. We're going to take advantage.
With that being said, in the spirit of course, parliamentary procedure, any old business, any new business, seeing none, I call this meeting to adjourn 2:36 p.m. Happy Black History Month to you. Have a good one.